Hey everyone, my name is Jordan Sale, and I'm the founder of a company called 81 Cents. And our mission is to help underrepresented professionals confidently negotiate their pay. I'm currently speaking to you all from the past. It is Tuesday, April 11th, and theoretically, all of you are joining sometime in May. However, the future version of myself is also joining in live to answer any questions that come up during the session. So feel free to drop those in the chat. I am very excited to be joining you all today to talk about a topic that I get a lot of questions about, which is how does negotiation change as you progress in your career? And as a senior professional, what do you need to consider as you kind of navigate new opportunities? So I wanted to start with a quick question in the chat, which is what's been your experience with negotiation? And does it feel harder or easier as you become more senior? So if it feels easier, put some sort of smiley face in the chat. And if it feels harder, drop a frown face. And I'd love to hear more about everyone's answers too. If it feels easier to you, what is it about negotiation that feels easier as you advance in your career? My sense is that it's probably getting more reps in and just generally feeling more confident in yourself and your professional experience. But if it feels harder, I'd love to hear why that is. Is it that the negotiations feel more complicated? Do the stakes feel higher? Either way, I am excited for us to have a chance to discuss all of this today. And my hope is by the end of the session, everyone will feel more confident and more prepared for their next negotiation. So let me take a step back and quickly introduce myself. My background is in product and marketing, and I spent a number of years in the early stage startup world. And while I consider myself to be a pretty outgoing person, I've always really struggled to negotiate. I was lucky enough to have mentors to guide me through the process of negotiating, but I never liked it, and I always felt really guilty for asking for more pay. After one particularly challenging negotiation with an early stage fintech company, I decided that enough was enough, and I needed to figure out how to make the process of negotiating less miserable. So I started reading books, talking to people who were good at negotiating, and eventually helping my family and friends. And in 2018, I decided to formalize these learnings into a company called 81 Cents. And actually, the first way I publicized 81 Cents was by posting in the Women in Product Facebook group. So here is a screenshot of that original post. So many people responded positively, and all of our first users actually came from the Women in Product community, which I am extremely grateful for. Since then, I've had a chance to help over 1,000 professionals negotiate with a focus on underrepresented engineers, data scientists, and product managers. And in the past few years, we've worked with more and more senior leaders, which tends to be a longer, more complex negotiation process. This year, I've had a chance to support professionals in negotiating with Google, Meta, Amazon, as well as about a dozen early stage and mid-sized startups. And I'm excited to share some of our learnings with you all over the next 25 minutes or so. And as a reminder, feel free to drop questions in the chat along the way because I am there answering them. So here's a quick look at what we're going to cover. My goal is to give you as much tangible information and as many frameworks as possible to walk away with. And there also are a few specific documents accompanying this presentation, including a compensation guide with specific data on what we're seeing for senior level product roles in the market right now. So first, it might be helpful to outline what sort of roles we're talking about when we say senior level negotiation. Generally, I'm referring to roles at and above the senior manager level. There's definitely some variance in what negotiations look like when you're negotiating for, a senior PM role at a big company like Apple versus a VP of product offer at a Series A startup. But for the purposes of today's presentation, I'm going to try to touch on themes that apply to people kind of across these different kinds of companies and roles. So there are a number of things that make negotiating at the senior level unique from negotiations earlier in your career. First, who you are negotiating with is likely different than in mid-level roles. You're far more likely to be negotiating with the senior leader, and board approval might even be required depending on what size of company you're joining and what role you're joining. If you're joining a startup, it's very likely you'll be negotiating with someone in the C-suite, probably the CEO. For example, I just worked with a woman who got a VP offer from a Series B startup, and she was negotiating directly with the CEO. This was challenging because the CEO was, first an experienced negotiator, but also understandably an amazing salesperson for the company. So he was very persuasive about the company's prospects and how valuable the equity package was going to be in the future. It's helpful to be aware of this and how this might impact your ability to negotiate and advocate for yourself. Another factor to consider is length of negotiation time. There is a common misconception that negotiations are supposed to be quick, especially if the interview process has been lengthy. However, we see that senior level negotiations can actually take several weeks, if not months. So here are a couple of examples of recent ones, and you can see how they vary in length. While this might seem frustrating or challenging, slowing down the negotiation process can actually be a very good thing and to your benefit. And it can give you a chance to first line up other potential offers and opportunities. Second, back channel to get other perspectives on the role, team, and company's outlook. For example, talking to a previous employee or one of the company's investors. And then three, it can give you a chance to build up negotiation leverage from what you've learned from all of these back channel conversations. For example, if you can find out that the company has been trying to recruit a director of product for 6 months, then you probably have a lot more negotiation leverage than if they're just starting their search. Plus, I would encourage you to think about the negotiation process as a chance to get to know the company and really figure out if it's going to be a place where you can be successful. Having hard conversations about compensation, responsibilities, team dynamics, etc., gives you a chance to learn more about the leadership team and how they make decisions. And if you can't have open conversations about something challenging at this point, how is that going to bode for your future at the company? So in addition to who you're negotiating with and the length of the negotiation being different, what's on the table during a negotiation is often different from earlier in your career as well. Earlier on in our careers, we are often primarily negotiating comp, base, bonus, equity, maybe a signing bonus. But here's a list of some of the other considerations as you get into more senior roles. And in the interest of time, I'm just going to overview a few of these that we've seen come up lately. So first, severance is super important to think about with negotiations at the senior level. Many people think that this is something you might negotiate just if you get laid off. However, it's actually more helpful to negotiate it up front before you get started in a role, because at this point you still have really significant leverage. Having a solid severance package helps you ensure that you're protected in the event that things at the company change. So as an example, I recently spoke with a VP who'd been laid off after over a year at a company with only 2 weeks of severance and without their annual bonus for the past year. He told me he'd wished that he'd negotiated his severance package up front for this exact reason. One detail on severance packages, sometimes when you're negotiating at the senior level, it can be described as adding a parachute clause. So if you hear that come up, they're generally referring to severance. Another thing that's on the table at the most senior levels is negotiating your level or title. And while this is something you can always try for throughout your career, it's much more common at senior levels. So I'll give an example of this. I recently had the chance to work with a really awesome woman who'd been in a senior manager role at Workday and left because she felt that she'd plateaued and didn't see a clear path to the next level, the director level. She was also interested in moving to more of a startup environment where her growth would be faster. Shortly after leaving Workday, she got an offer from a Series C startup to come in at the senior manager level. And while she was excited about the company, after some reflection, she realized that this offer wasn't why she left Workday. And it would actually be a step down in terms of scope because she'd be at the same level, but at a much smaller company. She'd also received the offer fairly quickly and had gotten awesome feedback from her interviewers. So she asked if there would be a possibility to be considered for a director level role. The hiring manager said that they weren't sure, but they could do a couple more interviews to try and see. So she ended up having 4 more interviews and was ultimately given the director level offer, which came with a 25% pay increase. She also got the satisfaction of knowing that she had fully advocated for herself and was going to be taking a significant step up in responsibility, moving from managing ICs to managing managers. So the up level is one of my all-time favorite negotiation strategies, and it's often a big part of what's being discussed at the senior level. So I'm curious to hear from everyone watching in the chat. Have you tried negotiating for an up level before? What was your experience like? I think we'd all love to learn from each other. Another thing that's possible to negotiate at senior levels is a bonus for staying at the company for multiple years, also known as a retention bonus. This can either be as a cash bonus or as an equity refresher. But cash retention bonuses are a little bit more unique, especially in tech. So I wanted to give some more information on them. Typically, cash retention bonuses make sense to ask for when, first, you've maxed out on base salary, signing bonus, and annual bonus negotiations. Two, you're in a stage of life where having cash is more important to you than equity. However, you still want to align your long-term interests with the company. Three, you're in a role where the impact might not come for a couple of years down the line, and the company is very aware of that. And maybe they've had like a series of people kind of leave before the 1 year mark, and they really care about retention. Or four, you're joining a private company and the equity isn't going to be liquid for a long time. So we've seen successful multi-year retention bonuses negotiated at companies like Fiverr, Mozilla, as well as lots of mid-sized startups. So it's definitely something to keep in mind if you are expecting a more senior level offer in the near future. And then the last piece I want to mention that's unique to senior level negotiations is the idea of negotiating for resources. And actually, you're really negotiating for your ability to be successful in the role. So there's a story I like a lot from Phil Terry, who's the author of a book called Never Search Alone, and who's also speaking at the Women in Product Conference. Phil talks about how two candidates are interviewing for chief product officer roles, and both receive an offer from a Series A startup. One CPO negotiates comp and then signs the offer. But the other CPO actually spends a few weeks talking with the founders and their board about their plans for approaching the work. They flag that there's a lot of technical debt, and they plan to spend the first quarter resolving it so they can be more productive at executing on an ambitious roadmap. They have some uncomfortable conversations with the leadership team about expectations because the leadership team wants them to move faster, but they are very clear about what they can accomplish and what they can't accomplish. This all happens after they've received the offer. So who do you think does better in the role? Well, the first CPO joins and spends a year battling with the leadership team about expectations, pace of work, etc., and ultimately leaves looking for other CPO roles. And the second CPO has way more success. They resolve the technical debt and then ambitiously get started on the roadmap. And within 2 years, they actually move into a CEO role. So this is why slowing down the negotiation process is so important, and why you don't want to think of it as being just about compensation, because ultimately it's about so much more than that, and really whether or not you're being set up to be successful at this new company. I do want to mention, though, that while senior level negotiations are quite a departure from early career and mid-career negotiations, they are still similar in a few core ways. So the first way that they're similar is the idea of a Batna, which stands for your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Your Batna is effectively your plan B or your backup option if you don't accept the offer that you have. Having a strong Batna can substantially impact how your negotiation goes. For example, I'm sure we've all done a job search when we hate our current job, which would be considered our baseline, versus a job search when we really like our current role, but we're just looking more opportunistically. If we hate our current job, we're very eager to leave, and we're much, much more likely to accept the very first offer we get and not negotiate ambitiously because we're so focused on kind of getting out of our current job. However, if we really like our current job, maybe even love it, then any new opportunity needs to be extremely compelling in order for us to seriously consider it. And we're much more likely to negotiate ambitiously since we know we'd be totally fine if the new offer doesn't work out. This can lead to a huge difference in results. So the smartest negotiators strengthen their Batna as early as possible, whether that's working to improve their current role so they don't feel like they need to leave as immediately, or even getting freelance or advising work so you don't need to accept the first offer that you get. So a couple of examples of improving your Batna at the senior level. So we recently worked with an engineering manager who was very eager to leave her current role. Part of the reason she was eager to leave is because it was a hybrid role and they were asking her to kind of start coming into the office more frequently. So while she did start looking at new opportunities, she also spent a good amount of time actually negotiating with her current company to see if she could get approval to be fully remote. She was able to successfully do that. And so while she still wants a new opportunity for a variety of reasons, it's not urgent. It's not pressing because she kind of took care of her day-to-day needs. Secondly, a different example is there's a VP of product who's currently not working right now, and they have actually lined up a bunch of like freelance and advising work so that they don't need to take the first offer that they get. They are very seriously looking for new roles. They are very seriously recruiting. They are spending a lot of time and energy on it, and they have a timeline of getting a new role in the next 6 months. But they separated that idea from kind of what they need to survive day to day today so that they could be more opportunistic about their future role. Ultimately, what kind of working on your Batna does is it allows you to negotiate more from a proactive and opportunistic place rather than a reactive and scarce one. And so tied to this, the second point I want to make is that the more attached you get to a new opportunity, the worse you negotiated it. The worse you negotiate it. So earlier on, I mentioned that I had my own kind of tough experience with negotiation at a fintech startup about 8 years ago or so. And part of why I negotiated that offer so poorly was because I'd gotten extremely attached to it during the interview process. I already had one foot out the door at my current company, and I could already envision myself in this new role. This made it very, very hard for me to negotiate it objectively because I was already extremely attached. I see this all the time. The more you like an opportunity, the worse you negotiate it. And it makes total sense. However, I would ask, wouldn't the best possible case scenario to be to both get an offer you're really excited about and then also to negotiate it really, really well so you feel great about your comp and your expectations once you get into a role? So there are a couple of ways you can help yourself stay a bit more detached from an opportunity that you're really excited about. First is you can outline your negotiation principles ahead of getting an offer so that you will have something concrete to stick to. So for example, writing down like, I won't accept an offer for less than X amount, or I will take at least 24 hours away from the offer once I receive it so that I give myself some time to reflect and can get a little bit less emotional about it. Another way to kind of stay more detached is to always explore the full competitive set. So for example, if you're very excited about a company in the alternative energy space, reach out to their 5 most direct competitors to try to drum up opportunities there. Third, remind yourself that you did not know about this company, X number of months ago. So while yes, it is exciting to think about joining, you were okay without them, you are okay without them, and if you don't end up working for them, you will continue to be okay. And this really ties to the idea of a scarcity mindset. So the scarcity mindset is kind of having this belief that I will never find another job opportunity as good as this one, where the opposite, an abundance mindset, is thinking, this is a good opportunity and I'm excited about it, but there will be future ones. I will be okay if I turn this down. It's surprising how experienced and how secure you can sort of objectively be in your career, very senior, very credentialed, but still be in a scarcity mindset that makes you negotiate poorly. It's worth noting that if turning down or losing an offer risks your ability to, feed, shelter, clothe yourself or your family, then you should absolutely listen to that. However, if you are in a more secure financial position, then you actually have a lot to lose by accepting a below market offer and not continuing to search. So one example of this, one of our clients had about 8 years of experience as a data engineer, and she had been job searching for 3 months. She had just finished up a grad program. She got an offer from a Boston-based startup for around 130K, which from our research, from her research, from her previous earnings before grad school, she knew that this was significantly below her market value. She ended up turning it down, continuing a job search, and then 6 weeks later, she received another offer, actually from Tesla, for over $300,000. She ended up taking it. She got a promotion within 2 years, and her career trajectory has been just stellar. So in this case, this candidate prolonging her job search for another 6 weeks allowed her to more than double her pay. And this is because she didn't believe that this was going to be the best job opportunity she got. She kind of bet on herself, even though it was very scary to do so, and believed that there would be more opportunities in the future, and there were. So all of the content I just walked through assumes you're at a place where you're getting a director, VP, or even a C-level offer. However, I know that there are some folks in the audience who aren't there yet. And so we get questions all the time about pathways into leadership. Is it better to work your way up within your existing organization or jump to the next level by moving to a new company? So let's do another quick poll. Put some sort of star emoji if you've broken into leadership by working your way up within your existing organization. And put a rocket ship, or type the word rocket ship, if you've gotten there by moving companies. So of course, for most of us, the answer is likely some of both. People often talk about how moving companies is the best way to quickly increase your compensation. For example, you can get a new offer that pays 40% more than your current one, but it's far less likely that you would get a 40% raise, even with a promotion. On the other hand, if you jump to a new company every year, you'll never get the experience or the track record you need to get to the management level. And there's also research that shows that about 60% of initial leadership opportunities come from an internal promotion. So you need a blend, sometimes optimizing for big jumps in seniority or compensation, and sometimes optimizing for growth opportunity. And to illustrate this, I think it's helpful to look at the career path of Louis Bocage, who was the senior director of engineering for Jet.com when it was acquired by Walmart. In the first 6 years of his career, Louis changed jobs 3 times. His average tenure at a company was just under 3 years. Under 2 years, sorry. However, then he landed at Jet.com, where he stayed for close to 7 years. So this is a breakdown of how Louis's roles changed along the way. He moved up 3 levels in 3 years, and then got a significant promotion when Jet was acquired by Walmart. And of course, this had a huge impact on his earnings too. You can see how his pay increases dramatically once he gets himself to an organization with significant growth opportunity. And in fact, he actually took a pay cut and a lateral title change in order to get there when he switched from investment banking to Jet.com in 2015. So I know it's kind of wild for me to say this as a negotiation coach, but I think the most important step here for Louis was actually taking the pay cut to join a high growth startup. This totally changed the slope of his earning potential because he was able to get to a place where there was a ton of growth opportunity. And this ties to a concept that I want to share from Shreyas Doshi, who's an awesome product leader and advisor, and he just launched a course on managing product management careers that I highly recommend. Shreyas says that you should think of your career across 3 dimensions. First, being good at your job. Second, being good at picking the right companies to work at, where you'll have ample opportunity for growth. And 3, being good at getting recognized, hired, and promoted. So most of you watching this today are probably pretty good at number 1, since you've made it, to the leadership level or close to it. However, 2 and 3 are much more challenging and totally outside of what most people think about when they think about what it takes to be a good product manager. Career success requires both high competency and effective influence to communicate the value you've created. If you aren't strategic about how you advocate for yourself and gain supporters inside the company, you will struggle with advancement despite working hard and being really smart. And specifically to point number 2 on picking the right companies, you can be an awesome PM, but if you're at companies without the possibility of growth, it will be hard for your career to excel. In the example I just shared, Louis Bocage was a great engineer. However, more importantly, he got himself into an environment at Jet.com where it was almost impossible not to grow because the company was growing so quickly. So I can't stress enough how important it is to think about the places you want to work and what sort of growth opportunity they're going to set you up for, and to run due diligence on companies, teams, managers before you join. As much as you may have asked questions during the interview process, you're often performing in order to get the job, and you often don't get all the information you need to make an informed decision. So once you get the offer, you can flip and run a reverse interview process with your manager and skip level or C-suite if you're at the VP or CPO level, which will not only help you evaluate if this is a place you can be successful, but actually build leverage for you to negotiate since you're getting more face time with so many members of the leadership team. There's an accompanying handout for this session that has like a big list of questions you can consider as part of this reverse interview process. There are also a few other ways you can vet an opportunity before taking it. The main one I want to talk about here is the idea of back channeling to get outside perspectives on the leadership team. So remember that your success at the most senior levels is directly tied to your ability to work for great leaders. So it's really important to have a strong sense of who they are. Depending on the stage of company, investors can also be really influential in how a company operates. So it can be really helpful to talk to other portfolio companies of the lead investors to see what it's like to work with them, how supportive they are they hands-on, et cetera. So I'm curious, for those of you who've kind of evaluated companies before joining, how have you gone about running this process? Are there certain questions you've been asking? And then I'm going to just quickly pivot because there's one more topic I want to talk about, which is how to decide if it makes sense to try to move into a leadership opportunity within your current company or whether it makes sense to go elsewhere. So here are a list of some of the questions to consider as you assess your pathway to promotion at your current company. The biggest point I want to make is that if your company isn't growing, it's going to be much harder for you to. And it can be helpful to also take a more analytical approach and look at the profiles of several of your peers to understand what their timeline and pathway to promotion look like. Did the promotion come when they changed teams? Is there a certain manager that tends to promote more quickly? I know this is a super cursory overview, so I'm also happy to talk more about this or answer questions in the chat. And so to close, because I am being told I'm out of time here, in the absence of a cheesy motivational quote, I just want to say that I know that negotiating and thinking super proactively about your career is really hard, uncomfortable, and it's much easier to talk about than it is to actually do it. However, it is essential that we do it and that we negotiate and that we advocate for ourselves and that we share our learnings with our peers and those in more junior positions than us so that we can all advance together and close gaps along the way. Over the past 5 years of working in this space, I've seen an unimaginable amount of, quite frankly, bullshit behavior from employers. And I've also seen an incredible amount of success stories from, the shyest, most timid, most unlikely of negotiators. So I promise you it gets better over time too. I am happy to take any questions. And if you want to connect about a new offer or how you're thinking about breaking into the leadership level, I am happy to chat. You can connect with me over LinkedIn or schedule a time using the Bitly link. So thank you all so much and looking forward to connecting with many of you.